Settle into whatever is holding you tonight, and let the room around you become quiet. Let your hands rest where they have fallen, allow your jaw to loosen, and notice that the surface beneath you asks for no further work. The sheets have already been spread. The pillow has already found its place. The long arrangement of floor, support, filling, covering, warmth, and privacy has been completed for you. I'm the Yawning Historian. Tonight, we will follow the slow history of beds, beginning long before a bed was a wooden object with legs, and long before any maker could carry one through a doorway. The first sleeping place in our story is difficult to separate from the floor. It has no frame, no mattress ticking, no carved headboard, and no clear edge beyond the edge made by gathered leaves and stems. It lies toward the back of Border Cave in southern Africa, where archaeologists have studied traces left through an immense depth of time. Researchers have reported sheaves of broad-leafed grass laid over ash there at least 200,000 years ago. They interpret the plant layers as surfaces used for sleeping and working. That description is careful. It does not turn the traces into a private bedroom, and it does not call them the first beds ever made. It gives us something quieter and more useful, a place where people arrange the ground. The cave opening admitted changing daylight, moving air, and sounds from beyond the rock. Farther inside, the light softened. The stone overhead did not need to be built, and the shelter did not need to be carried, but the surface beneath a resting body still required attention. Bare rock could be uneven. Loose earth could hold dampness, grit, and fragments left by work. A gathered layer of grass changed that meeting between body and ground. Many stems together created small spaces of air. Their broad leaves made a surface more yielding than stone. Their edges overlapped. Their color would have faded as they dried. Their scent would have shifted from green and sharp toward the quieter smell of stored plant fiber. No single night can be recovered from such remains. The surviving traces do not preserve a named person walking into the cave with an armful of grass. They do not preserve the exact order of gestures, the number of sleepers, or the hour at which the work was done. The scene must remain broad and modest. Grass was selected, carried, placed, used, and eventually covered or replaced. These actions are suggested by material that remained after nearly everything soft had vanished. The plant itself is fragile. The human motions around it are even more so. Imagine the work only as a measured sequence rather than a reconstructed biography. Stems are gathered where useful plants grow. A bundle is lifted. The leaves brush against one another with a dry whisper. Dust falls away during the walk back. Near the rear wall, the bundle is lowered and opened. The stems are spread in one direction, then another, until fewer hard patches can be felt beneath a palm. A second bundle fills a shallow place in the floor. Another softens the edge near the wall. Nothing here requires a perfect rectangle. The sleeping surface follows the cave, the stone, and the amount of material available. Researchers also found grass laid on ash. Some ash layers appear to have come from older bedding that had been burned during maintenance of the site. Ash can make a fine, pale foundation beneath fresh plant material. Scholars have suggested that it may also have helped deter some crawling insects, though the purpose cannot be recovered with certainty. The calmer fact is simply that people maintained the surface. Old material did not remain forever. It could be burned, covered, and replaced. A resting place was therefore not merely found. It was renewed. That renewal may be the earliest part of bed history that still feels familiar. The materials differ from those around you now, but the quiet labor does not. A surface used every day gathers dust, crumbs, broken fibers, and the small evidence of ordinary life. It needs shaking, airing, turning, sweeping, or changing. Before springs and bedsteads, there was already this repetitive care. Comfort was not locked inside an object bought once and left alone. It had to be assembled from things that bent, dried, flattened, scattered, and wore away. The distinction between floor and bed was therefore made by work. A patch of earth became a sleeping place when it was cleared and layered. Plant material became bedding when it was gathered and arranged. Ash became part of the surface when it was placed beneath fresh growth or left from an earlier layer. The edge remained soft and changeable. A foot could disturb it. A hand could restore it. In the morning, the place could still resemble the surrounding ground. Yet the difference had been known by the bodies that rested there. There may have been warmth nearby at some times, although the precise relation between fire and every sleeping layer cannot be assumed. A controlled fire could provide light and heat within a sheltered place. It could turn hard pieces of wood into embers that glowed without a high flame. The safest image is not a dramatic blaze, but a low, attended source of warmth, separated from dry bedding by space and care. Its light touches the uneven rock, reaches the outer leaves, and weakens before it finds the darkest part of the wall. Warmth is one of the recurring materials of a bed, even though it cannot be folded and stored in the same manner as grass or cloth. It may come from a fire, from another covering, from a heated room, or from the slow warmth retained by a structure. In this first scene, it stays near the edge. The gathered plants deal more directly with the ground. They make a little distance from stone and ash. They offer softness through quantity, each thin stem contributing almost nothing by itself, and the whole layer changing the surface beneath a shoulder or hip. Filling is another word that belongs much later, when fibers are enclosed inside fabric. Here the filling and covering are not yet separate. Leaves are surface and cushioned together. Their tips point across one another. Some fold, some spring back, some break after repeated use. A thick patch settles more than a thin one. Fresh material lies higher, and older material becomes compact. The sleeping place records weight by losing height. Much as later mattresses will form hollows and later pillows will need to be shaken into shape. Privacy is harder to see. The cave creates shelter, but the archaeological traces do not tell us how people divided their space, or whether they divided it at all. There is no reason to invent a curtain, a family arrangement, or a special sleeping chamber. It is enough to stay with the protected rear area and the change in light from entrance to interior. Privacy can remain only a degree of distance from wind, weather, movement, and the open landscape. It is a quieter corner rather than a separate room. The same surfaces may have supported work as well as sleep. Researchers describe sleeping and working areas because a prepared floor did not need to have a single purpose. A person could sit on grass while handling tools or plant material, then later lie down on the same arranged place. Modern rooms teach us to give every object a firm name and every area a planned function. The older trace refuses that neatness. It is a place made more usable, and rest is one of its uses. This lack of a strict category is worth keeping. A bed need not begin as furniture. It can begin as a decision about a surface. It can be temporary without being careless, simple without being effortless, and shared with daytime work without becoming less suitable for sleep. The history moves slowly because the needs themselves overlap. Dryness, softness, warmth, cleanliness, and a little separation from disturbance do not arrive as separate inventions. They are balanced with whatever the place provides. Later grass bedding at Border Cave, from tens of thousands of years ago, has also been examined through botanical study. Those remains do not create one unbroken household tradition from the oldest layer to the younger ones. Time between them is vast, and preservation is uneven. They do, however, remind us that plant bedding could leave recognizable traces when conditions allowed. Broad leaves, microscopic structures, ash, and the position of layers can become evidence only after patient analysis. The softness itself is gone. What survives is the faint architecture of softness. Archaeologists approach such a surface by refusing to make it say too much. A stain can mark an old fire, but not every intention behind it. A plant fragment can be identified, but not every preference of the person who gathered it. A layer can show repeated occupation, but not every nightly rhythm. Dating can place material within a deep span of time, while still leaving daily details outside our reach. The result is not an empty story. It is a story with gentle edges, much like the bedding itself. Those edges matter because soft materials usually disappear. Wood decays, cord rots, hides and leaves return to the earth. Cloth may survive only in rare conditions. The stone of a shelter lasts more readily than the arrangement laid upon it, so the distant past can look harder than it really felt. Museum cases fill with stone tools, fired clay, metal fittings, and carved objects because these endure. The missing world of baskets, mats, ties, stuffing, and folded covers was likely much larger than the surviving display. A history of beds must therefore listen for absence. The floor may preserve a dark patch where a soft layer once lay. Ash may preserve a plant impression. A dry place may hold a fiber that damp soil would have erased. A later burial may preserve furniture that an ordinary house would lose. Every surviving bed is filtered by material, climate, disposal, chance, and the decisions of excavators and collections. The most familiar part, the yielding place where a body rested, is often the first part to vanish. Return now to the cave floor, where maintenance continues without haste. Old stems have flattened. Their surfaces have collected fine dust. A hand lifts an edge, and the layer loosens. Some of it may be gathered for burning. Some may be swept aside. Ash from previous fires forms a thin bed beneath the new bed, one meaning of the word resting beneath another. Fresh grass arrives in bundles and is spread over the pale surface. The floor changes color. A rough patch disappears beneath overlapping leaves. This is not housekeeping in the later sense of a fixed room filled with possessions. There is no heavy frame to polish and no mattress to carry through a narrow doorway. Yet the pattern is already one of repeated domestic attention. Materials enter the shelter. Used materials leave or change form. A sleeping place is restored before it is needed again. The work can be done with simple gestures, but those gestures contain knowledge of which plants bend, which stems scratch, which layer has become too thin, and which corner remains driest. Plant bedding is portable in pieces rather than as a finished object. A bundle can be carried, while the whole sleeping place remains where it was laid. This is a different kind of mobility from moving a wooden bedstead. Nothing needs to preserve its shape between one site and another. The method travels more easily than the object. Gather, dry, layer, use, refresh. Each location provides a new version. Each version belongs partly to the people and partly to the ground beneath them. The absence of furniture also leaves the body close to the temperature of the earth. Stone releases stored coolness. Soil can hold moisture. Dry grass interrupts that contact without removing it completely. The layer bends into the contours below. It does not level every rise. It makes small negotiations between bone and rock, skin and fiber, warmth and night air. Later beds will try to create a more regular plane, but even they will sag, slope, stretch, and require adjustment. At the edge of the prepared surface, a few loose stems extend into the surrounding dust. They show how little boundary is needed. A modern mattress announces itself with stitched sides and measured dimensions. This earlier arrangement fades outward. The center is thicker, the margins thin. A sleeping body would find the useful area by touch rather than by a manufactured edge. In low light, The bed is less an object seen than a difference felt beneath the hand. Head support may also begin as a difference in height rather than a separate possession. The evidence here does not require a pillow, a rolled hide, or a stone placed beneath the neck. A thicker fold of grass near one end is enough as an image of possibility, and even that must remain only a possibility. The important distinction comes later. A sleeping surface supports the whole body. A head support changes one smaller angle. Once objects become more permanent, craftspeople will solve these needs separately. For now, the arrangement stays unified. The same grass lies beneath back, arm, and head. The same ash underlies all of it. The same sheltered air moves across the entire surface. A sound near the cave entrance becomes softer toward the rear. Embers settle. Their faint light holds for a while and then lowers. The stone ceiling remains, while everything made of plant fiber seems temporary beneath it. Morning does not reveal a room in the modern sense. It reveals a worked patch within a larger place. The grass has shifted under weight. A few stems have turned outward. Fine ash marks the underside of leaves. The surface can be aired, disturbed, added to, or left until another period of maintenance. It does not need to be folded into a linen cupboard. Storage may simply mean keeping and used bundles dry, though the exact practice at this site is unknown. The evidence permits the rhythm of renewal, not a detailed timetable. As dwellings become more permanent in later parts of our story, sleeping materials will remain inside walls built by people. Supports will rise above floors. Woodworkers will join rails and legs. Cord and leather will carry weight. Cloth will separate covering from filling. Chests will hold folded layers during the day. Yet none of those changes will remove the oldest task. Someone will still have to prepare the place where another body can become still. The bed changes whenever the problem changes. On this distant cave floor, the immediate problem is the hard and dusty ground. Grass provides a modest answer. Ash and maintenance provide another. Shelter changes the wind, and a controlled source of warmth may change the cold. There is no single invention moment, only a group of materials arranged together and then arranged again. Even the choice to place broad leaves near the rear of the shelter joined knowledge of landscape to knowledge of rest. Useful plants grew outside the cave, while the protected surface waited within it. Distance separated material from destination. Carrying joined them. That small passage, from living plant to gathered bundle to laid surface, would remain part of bedding for a very long time. Reed mats, straw fillings, flax linen, wool covers, and later manufactured fibers would each begin elsewhere before entering the room of sleep. A bed has always drawn the outer world inward, then asked household labor to sort, shape, and care for what arrived. The traces also preserve an alternation between accumulation and clearing. Layers build, then a surface is renewed. One occupation leaves material beneath another. Archaeological depth turns repeated maintenance into a slow vertical record. The people who arranged the newest grass would not have seen that record as researchers see it now. They encountered only the immediate surface, its dry places, its worn places, and the next bundle required. Time later placed their ordinary acts one above another. That slow repetition is the first chapter of the bed. It is not a parade of famous makers or perfect dates. It is the nearly silent sound of leaves being carried inward. It is the palm passing over a surface to find a hard place. It is old bedding becoming ash and new bedding settling above it. It is ordinary care surviving as fragments long after every voice in the cave has faded. There is no hurry as the scene begins to loosen. The broad leaves lie lower now, their green long softened into muted brown. The embers have cooled to a dim red beneath a skin of gray. At the margins, the sleeping place already returns to the earth around it. One stem, one grain of ash, and one shallow impression at a time. The stone holds the last warmth without movement. The fibers settle into one another. In the sheltered dark, the first bed in our story becomes almost indistinguishable from the quiet ground. The sleeping place rises from the floor very gradually. First there is a cleared patch, then a mat or folded textile, then a flexible surface held inside a wooden frame. In ancient Egypt, surviving objects allow us to see some of these raised forms with unusual clarity. They do not describe every household, and they do not preserve every ordinary bed. They offer separate, carefully dated examples. Wooden rails joined together, cord or leather supports stretched between them, linen folded nearby, and headrests shaped to hold the neck above the sleeping surface. Enter the room slowly, after the brighter work of the day has ended. Its walls are plastered, their pale surfaces receiving a small amber light from an open oil lamp. A low wooden bed stands away from one wall. A chest and a stool occupy their own modest spaces. Folded cloth rests where it can remain dry. The room is not presented as a portrait of every Egyptian home. It is a quiet arrangement built from objects that museums and archaeological contexts have allowed historians to study. Among Egyptians who owned a bed, the frame created a clear separation from the floor, would carry the load through rails and legs. A flexible support of interlaced cord, webbing, or leather could span the open middle. Surviving examples suggest that some beds sloped, and some included a footboard. These details varied with period, construction, and the means of the owner. The raised bed was one solution among others. Many people rested on mats or folded textile pads rather than on a framed piece of furniture. The frame begins with wood selected and shaped by practiced hands. Egypt did not offer every kind of timber in equal abundance, and furniture makers worked within changing supplies of local and imported material. Our sources do not let us follow the full biography of every rail, so the wood remains unnamed here. It is enough to notice the labor in its straightened edges. A rough branch has become a measured length. A joint has been cut. Two pieces meet closely enough to carry weight through many nights. Joinery gives the bed its enduring outline, yet the middle remains intentionally flexible. A solid board would create a different weight and feel. Cord or leather can yield slightly beneath a sleeper. Lines cross from side to side or interlace into a supporting field. Each length must be secured. Each crossing contributes to the whole. With use, tension changes. Fibers stretch. Knots and attachment points need attention. The bedstead is therefore not one completed object, but a partnership between rigid rails and a surface that can loosen. Before night, the supporting web can be inspected by touch. A hand passes along the edge where cord meets wood. A slack section is adjusted. Dust is brushed from the rail. The frame may stand low by later standards, but even a modest height changes the movement of air beneath the sleeper and changes the contact with the floor. It also makes the bed visible as a distinct possession. The edge can be grasped. The space beneath it can be swept. Its legs leave small zones of shadow in the lamplight. Linen adds another long chain of work. Flax must be cultivated, gathered, processed, spun, and woven before cloth can be washed, dried, folded, and laid upon a bed. A finished sheet hides all of those stages inside its even surface. In the night room, The cloth appears simple, a pale layer against darker wood, a folded edge, a soft crease. Yet each thread once passed through hands and tools, and each broad piece exists because many fine threads were kept under patient tension. The cloth can serve as a layer between body and support, or as a covering, depending on the household, season, and available possessions. The sources do not justify one universal arrangement. Folded sheets are known, and textiles appear in the record, but the number and placement of layers cannot be assigned to every sleeper. Our room, therefore, contains only what can remain plausible: linen folded over the woven support, another piece resting on the chest, and a surface prepared without an excess of modern softness. Washing linen is as important to the nightly scene as weaving it. Cloth takes in dust, skin, oil, and the smell of the room. Water loosens some of what daily use leaves behind. Wet linen becomes heavy. It must be handled, dried, and folded again. Sunlight can brighten it. Air moves through it. A repaired edge may remain visible where a tear has been caught before it widens. The quiet bed at night is the last stage of work done elsewhere during the day. Folded cloth also creates order in a room where possessions must occupy limited space. A sheet laid flat uses the area of the bed. The same sheet folded several times becomes a compact rectangle that can rest inside a box or on a chest. The gesture will recur throughout bed history. Bedding expands at night and contracts in the morning. Private rest depends on public labor, storage, carrying, and the repeated making of space. Beside the bed, a headrest gives the sleeping arrangement a form that can seem unfamiliar now. Surviving Egyptian headrests have a curved upper section designed to support the neck. A wooden example in the Metropolitan Museum dates to the Middle Kingdom, around 2030 to 1802 BCE. Its shape is clear and deliberate. A vertical support lifts the curved top above a base. The object does not resemble a stuffed pillow, yet it addresses the same smaller problem within the larger sleeping surface: the position of the head. It is easy to let an unfamiliar object gather fanciful explanations. The calmer course is to remain with what its form and context support. A curved top could cradle the neck. Headrests are known through archaeology, and their materials and shapes varied. They do not prove that every Egyptian used one, that everyone found one equally comfortable, or that people slept upright. They do not provide a general medical claim. They are pieces of sleeping equipment whose use must be understood without turning difference into oddity. Place the wooden headrest near one end of the bed. Its base remains stable on the flexible surface or another supporting layer. The curved top receives a folded bit of cloth in some imagined arrangements, though that detail cannot be required for every object. What matters is its elevation. The headrest separates support for the neck from support for the rest of the body. The bed is becoming a collection of coordinated parts rather than one gathered layer. That collection can include frame, webbing, linen, and headrest, with stool and chest serving the work around them. A stool provides a temporary surface or a place to sit while cloth is arranged. A box protects folded material from some of the dust of the room. The lamp gives enough light for a final check along the bed edge. None of these objects must be grand. Their quiet usefulness is more important than ornament. Survival, however, favors some forms of grandeur in some special contexts. Much of what remains from ancient Egypt comes from tombs, funerary deposits, temple settings, and the possessions of people whose goods were selected for preservation. Dry conditions can protect wood and textiles that would disappear elsewhere, but preservation is never a simple census of daily life. A bed found in a burial cannot automatically be treated as an ordinary bed used each night. An image made for a tomb cannot be read as a candid view of every house. One surviving object makes the boundary especially clear. A bed dated to the late period, around 664 to 332 BCE, is identified by the Metropolitan Museum as an embalmer's bed, a specialized support associated with mummification. It is a bed by shape and function of support, but it does not tell us how a household sleeper arranged an ordinary night. Its existence is useful precisely because it warns against placing every bed-shaped object in a bedroom. The word bed can gather many meanings in a collection catalog. A frame may support sleep, ritual work, a body in preparation, or an image of status. Context narrows the meaning. Location, date, construction, where, inscriptions, associated objects, and comparison with other evidence all matter. When those details are incomplete, the spoken story should remain incomplete too. A careful gap is better than a bright invention. Ordinary households leave a thinner record. A mat used until it frays may be discarded without entering a protected context. A folded textile pad can rot. A simple wooden frame can be reused as fuel, repaired into another object, or lost to insects and damp. The poorer the household, the less likely its complete sleeping arrangement may be to survive as a celebrated museum object. This does not mean the arrangement lacked skill. It means archaeology has preserved wealth and special deposits unevenly. Imagine, then, a second room beyond the first, with no raised bed at all. A mat lies on a prepared floor. Folded textile adds thickness. The layers can be lifted during the day, shaken, aired, and placed against a wall or inside storage. This sleeping place answers many of the same needs as the wooden frame, with different materials and a different claim on space. It is not a failed version of the richer bed. It is another arrangement, more portable and less likely to leave a recognizable outline after thousands of years. The raised bed and the floor mat therefore belong in the same history without being forced into one average. Climate, region, date, household resources, and personal circumstance all shape the surface used for rest. A person might encounter different arrangements during a lifetime. A child, worker, traveler, servant, and household owner did not necessarily meet the night on identical furniture. The surviving examples suggest variety, while collections can show only fragments of that variety. Back in the room with the wooden frame, the bed is being prepared in a measured order. The support is checked first. Linen is opened from its folds and allowed to spread. One edge follows the rail. Another is drawn across the center. The cloth does not need to be perfectly smooth. Its creases soften as it lies. A headrest is placed near the upper end. A remaining textile is kept folded until the cooler hours make it useful. The oil lamp burns close enough to guide the work and far enough from loose cloth to leave a margin of safety. Its flame is small. The light does not fill every corner. It warms the nearest plaster and turns the far wall gray. Wood reflects only a narrow amber line along a polished edge. The woven support beneath the linen remains visible in shadow, a dark grid carrying the pale plane above it. Air in the room is dry enough in this scene that cloth releases the warmth of the day slowly. Outside, the temperature settles after sunset. The bed holds no built-in heat. Warmth comes from textiles, from the enclosed room, and from the body that will occupy the surface. A cover can be drawn closer. A fold can be doubled where more thickness is wanted. The solution remains adjustable, made of layers rather than mechanisms. Privacy also depends upon the room and household rather than upon the bed alone. The evidence does not permit one rule for who slept behind which wall. A doorway, a screen, distance from a busier area, or simply the lowering activity of the household could create degrees of quiet. The bed frame marks a personal surface more clearly than scattered grass did, but ownership of the object does not reveal every social arrangement around it. Night makes the furniture seem more permanent than it is. The wooden rails remain in place while linen shifts with each use. Cord stretches. Joints dry and respond to the air. A leg can loosen. A surface can sag. Repair belongs beside craftsmanship. The maker gives the frame its first shape, and household care allows that shape to continue. Beds will remain this combination of skilled construction and repetitive maintenance for centuries. The slope found on some surviving Egyptian beds adds another quiet detail without giving us one explanation for every example. A frame that is not completely level changes how cloth lies across it. Gravity draws a fold toward the lower end. A footboard can interrupt that movement and give the frame a finished boundary. The combination appears in surviving material, but it must stay attached to those examples. It does not become the plan of every bed along the Nile, across every dynasty, or within every kind of household. Measurements can also tempt a modern observer into easy conclusions. A surviving frame may look short beside a contemporary bed, yet dimensions alone do not reveal a sleeper's posture, height, or use of the object. A specialized support may never have served ordinary sleep at all. Missing components can change the apparent length. The careful account describes what remains, compares it with related objects, and stops before the object is made to perform a nightly scene it cannot document. The dry climate often associated with Egyptian preservation deserves the same restraint. Dry conditions helped some organic material endure, but not every site remained uniformly dry, and not every object survived. Flooding, burial practice, reuse, insects, excavation history, and modern collecting all altered the record. A preserved strip of cloth is therefore both valuable and selective. It tells us that this cloth existed in this context. It does not calculate how much linen an ordinary neighborhood owned. Craft leaves clues that use alone cannot provide. A joint can show how a carpenter expected rails to meet. Holes, and where can suggest where a flexible support was attached. Spacing reveals the intended rhythm of the web. A headrest's polished areas may record handling, although where must be interpreted cautiously. Textile structure preserves the decisions of spinners and weavers at a scale finer than the room itself. Bed history lives in these small technical choices as much as in complete furniture. Seen together, the choices create a layered system, which solves the need for a stable outline and elevation. Cord or leather creates a yielding center. Linen changes texture and can be removed for washing. A headrest supports one part of the body without filling the entire surface. Storage protects what is not currently in use. No layer does every job. The bed becomes more complex not because a single invention replaces the ground, but because separate materials begin to answer separate needs. The headrest waits at the end of the linen. Its curved top holds a line of shadow. Seen from the doorway, it might look like a small piece of architecture, a base, a column, and a shallow crescent. Up close, tool marks and where may make it more human in scale. It was shaped to meet the body at one narrow place. That contact, repeated over time, is the purpose beneath its formal outline. Morning reverses the order. Light reaches the plaster and reduces the lamp to an unnecessary ember. A cover is lifted and aired. Linen is drawn from the frame, shaken gently, then folded along remembered lines. The headrest is moved aside. Dust can be removed from the support and from the space beneath the bed. What expanded across the room during sleep becomes a smaller stack again. The raised frame remains. This is the clearest change from the ancient plant surface in our first story. The earliest bedding could almost return completely to the ground when it was abandoned. The wooden bedstead continues to occupy space even when no one sleeps. It becomes furniture, a lasting structure around which a room is arranged. Its empty outline announces that night will return. Yet the oldest layer has not disappeared. Plant fiber survives in cord and cloth. The flexible middle still resembles many strands gathered into one supportive surface. Bedding still needs airing and replacement. Dust still settles. Warmth still depends on layering. A bed can rise from the floor without escaping the recurring work of making a place fit for rest. From Egypt, our history will move toward the varied furniture of the Mediterranean world, where a couch could carry social meanings beyond sleep. There is no need to move quickly. For now, the linen has been laid still. The wooden frame holds its quiet tension. The headrest remains a gentle curve in the small pool of lamplight. The flame narrows to an amber point. Shadows settle between the cords and beneath the rails. In the dry night air, folded linen, pale plaster, and carefully joined would rest without movement, while the quiet frame keeps its patient shape until morning. By the time our slow history reaches the Roman world, the bed has become difficult to follow by shape alone. A broad raised surface can look familiar to modern eyes, yet its meaning depends on where it stands and what people do around it. In an elite Roman dining room, the important horizontal furniture was not primarily introduced as a place for nighttime sleep. It was a couch for reclining at a private banquet, part of a social arrangement in which food, company, posture, and display met around a table. This chapter therefore stays within one carefully bounded room. It does not try to reconstruct an ordinary Roman bedroom, an inn, a baraque, or the sleeping arrangements of an empire that stretched across many climates and centuries. The evidence gathered for our story supports the dining couch of elite reception. It does not support a universal Roman bed. That narrower room is still enough. It shows how a piece of furniture can receive a resting body while carrying meanings very different from sleep. For the next little while, we can imagine that dining room after the meal has ended. The dimness, the softened footsteps, and the last gentle gleam across the furniture are quiet literary framing. They are not a claim about one excavated evening. Within that frame, the historical outline remains simple and firm. Elite diners reclined on couches at private banquets. The practice was also known in the Greek world. In Rome, it became part of a recognizable language of dining and reception. The Latin word triclinium is often translated as a three-couch room. A typical arrangement placed three broad couches around a central table, although archaeological arrangements could vary. The number gives the room an easy shape to hold in the mind. One couch rests along one side, another along the next, and a third completes the group while leaving an approach to the table. The furniture directs attention inward, toward shared food and the people gathered there. Nothing in that arrangement needs to hurry. A couch is a patient object. It waits beside the table before the guests arrive, supports them while the banquet continues, and remains when conversation has faded. Its history is not a list of dramatic inventions. It is the history of what placed at a useful height, bodies arranged according to a social custom, and a room whose plan quietly tells each object what role it will play. Many Roman dining couches were made of wood. That plain fact carries most of the physical story. In our literary outline, the wood holds the couch's broad silhouette, while finer construction details remain unseen. We do not need to supply those missing details or treat one surviving object as a balanced sample of everything that once stood in Roman rooms. The wooden dining couch itself belongs securely within the evidence for the banquet. Costly versions could bear fittings of ivory or bronze. Those materials did more than help an object catch the eye of a modern museum visitor. In their ancient elite setting, they marked expense and workmanship. Ivory offered a pale, smooth contrast to darker timber. Bronze could hold a warmer or deeper gleam. The fitting did not turn the couch into a different category of furniture. It made the social message of the same broad reclining form more visible. We can let the imagined room grow quiet around those few supported details. 3 couches, 1 table, wooden frames, and, in an opulent house, fittings of ivory or bronze. The rest can remain indistinct. There is no need to decide what filled every cushion, how every joint was made, or how a particular household cared for the furniture. The room is calmer when uncertain details are allowed to stay in shadow. The central table gives the couches their direction. Each broad form is oriented toward the shared space rather than turned away into privacy. A diner reclines in relation to food and company. The posture belongs to the banquet. This is the crucial distinction in a history of beds. A body at rest does not automatically transform its support into a sleeping bed. Reclining can be social, ceremonial, conversational, and fully awake. Modern categories encourage us to give every piece of furniture one permanent name. A bed belongs in a bedroom. A dining chair belongs near a table. A sofa belongs in another room. Ancient evidence is less obedient to those tidy labels, and translation can make the boundaries look firmer than they were. Yet flexibility does not mean that every couch served every purpose. Context remains the gentlest and most reliable guide. In the triclinium, context comes from the group. 3 couches form a plan around a table. Elite private dining gives that plan its documented use. The furniture is read through the room, not through resemblance alone. Take one couch away from its companions, and its ancient role becomes harder to see. Place it again beside the table, with the other broad couches completing the arrangement, and the social geometry returns. The phrase social geometry sounds more formal than the experience needs to feel. It simply means that objects guide bodies into patterns. A table gathers attention. A broad couch permits reclining rather than upright sitting. 3 sides create a partial enclosure, close enough for a meal to be shared and open enough for movement into the group. The room organizes company before anyone speaks. Imagine the plan from above, as slowly as if it had been drawn with charcoal. The table is a quiet shape near the center. Along 3 sides lie the longer forms of the couches. Around them, the rest of the room can fade into an unmarked field. No guest doorway, painted wall, or household routine is required. The supported arrangement alone gives the scene balance. Now lower the viewpoint until the table and couches become silhouettes. The wooden portions hold most of the darkness. A bronze detail on a costly example may be allowed one muted glint within our literary night. An ivory fitting may remain pale for a moment longer than the wood. These are not instructions for reconstructing one specific triclinium. They are a way of resting attention upon materials that the museum account securely names. Wood, bronze, and ivory can occupy very different places in a modern museum display. This is a general reflection on how we look at fragmentary furniture, not a reconstruction of one Roman couch's discovery. A fitting that appears prominent in a case may still be read as one detail within the much larger wooden form named by the banquet source. That change of scale is useful to remember. A small decorative fitting can attract more attention than the broad wooden frame that carried the reclining body. Ivory and bronze can make luxury easy to picture, while plain wood recedes. Our chapter gently reverses the emphasis, keeping the ornament visible but allowing the documented wooden couch to remain the larger form. Our imagined room can reverse that imbalance for a while. Let the fittings become subtle again. Let the wooden forms recover their scale. 3 broad couches occupy more space than any ornamental detail. The table steadies the center. The room is no longer a collection of isolated museum materials. It becomes, cautiously and without extra claims, the outline of an elite dining arrangement. Before the banquet, the arrangement waits. During the banquet, it supports diners who recline. After the banquet, it remains an arrangement even when empty. Those 3 moments are literary divisions rather than a documented timetable, but they help the mind observe one historical fact from several angles. Furniture can be understood not only as a thing, but also as a place prepared for a repeated kind of gathering. Reclining changes the pace of a meal. The body is not held upright in the manner of a modern dining chair. Weight extends along the couch. Attention turns toward the table and toward others nearby. We need not prescribe an exact pose to every diner. Ancient visual and written evidence belongs to particular settings, and the source boundary here is broader. The safe point is simply that elite Roman diners reclined on couches at private banquets. The practice was not created in isolation. It was also known in the Greek world. That connection places the Roman banquet within a longer Mediterranean culture of elite reclining. It does not require us to trace every step of transmission tonight. History can sometimes rest on a clear relation without turning it into a straight road. Customs are borrowed, adapted, repeated, and made local through countless meals that leave uneven evidence behind. The couch therefore sits at a meeting point. It is material furniture made largely of wood. It can be expensive display when bronze or ivory fittings are added. It is social equipment because it supports a particular form of elite dining. And, to modern eyes, it remains close enough to a bed-like shape to trouble any simple story in which beds and couches always belong to separate worlds. That trouble is quiet and useful. Our larger history began with plant material arranged on the ground, a surface that could support more than one daily activity. It then moved to surviving Egyptian beds raised on frames, while remembering that ownership and form varied. The Roman dining couch adds another layer. A raised frame may support the resting body, but posture alone cannot tell us whether the object belongs to sleep. Room, company, and arrangement must speak as well. In a triclinium, the table is not a minor prop. It anchors the meaning of the couches. The other couches matter too. One broad frame beside a table might be ambiguous. 3 forming a typical dining arrangement create a stronger pattern, even while archaeology reminds us that variance existed. History becomes clearer through relationships among objects. The word typical deserves a soft voice. It describes a recognized arrangement, not a rule that every elite Roman dining space followed without variation. Buildings change. Owners change. Local traditions and available space change. Archaeological remains show differences. The triclinium gives us a useful type, but no type should be made to erase the rooms that did not fit it exactly. The word elite also deserves to remain close to every banquet image. The source describes private banquets among people with the means to arrange and display such furniture. It is not a census of Roman households. It does not tell us that everyone reclined at meals or owned a decorated couch. Luxury fittings especially narrow the social field. Ivory and bronze belong here as possible signs of costly versions, not as standard furniture for an entire population. By keeping those boundaries, the room becomes more believable rather than less vivid. 3 wooden couches are enough. One may carry fittings that suggest considerable expense. The table needs no mountain of imagined food. The guests need no invented names. The chapter can linger on proportion, material, and arrangement, letting the documentary facts remain visible within a calm field of invention. We may picture the meal already finished because an empty room asks less of the listener. This is openly a literary choice. The historical claim concerns reclining at elite private banquets, not the exact silence afterward. In the softened scene, the couches hold shallow impressions only in imagination. The table has become a dark central plane. Whatever conversation filled the room is now allowed to dissolve without being reconstructed. One by one, the details recede. First, the social distinctions attached to particular places on the couches, which this chapter does not attempt to map. Then the food and vessels, which do not need description. Then the architecture beyond the dining arrangement. What remains is the simplest supported constellation: broad couches, commonly wooden, set around a central table in a typical triclinium. The costly fittings remain only at the edge. Bronze is a small point of weight and color. Ivory is a small point of light. Their value belongs to the visible presentation of elite furniture, yet neither material carries the diner by itself. The broad couch remains the essential form. Ornament speaks because structure gives it somewhere to rest. There is a gentle lesson in that dependence. History often preserves the exceptional object more readily in public memory. The decorated couch is easier to notice than an unadorned wooden one. Luxury appears in catalogs, paintings, and stories because it attracts attention. Yet the source itself reminds us that couches were frequently wooden, while ivory and bronze fittings belong to more opulent examples. The ordinary material remains beneath the memorable surface. If we listen to the room instead of looking at it, the same balance appears. The banquet has ended in our literary frame, so no ancient conversation is invented. The furniture gives no speech. Wood is simply present. The table does not move. The three couch forms keep their long relation to one another. Silence turns the social arrangement into something almost architectural. The couches define edges around a center, much as walls define edges around a room. Their arrangement creates a place within a place. During dining, that inner space belonged to shared attention. In the imagined aftermath, it belongs to stillness. The historical plan and the literary quiet overlap without needing to be confused. This distinction between evidence and framing can itself be restful. We do not need to know every color. We do not need to guess the fibers hidden beneath a diner or the routine that followed a meal. We do not need to turn a dining couch into a sleeping bed in order to keep it within our story. Its importance lies precisely in refusing that transformation. The slow history of beds is not only a history of objects used at night. It is also a history of neighboring forms that reveal how societies organized rest, posture, privacy, warmth, work, and status. The Roman dining couch belongs as a neighbor. It shows that a bed-like silhouette can be drawn into public sociability and elite display. Its similarity to a bed opens the chapter, while its documented dining context keeps the conclusion careful. Imagine once more the three-sided plan. Along the first side, a wooden couch. Along the second, another. Along the third, the final broad form. The central table rests within reach of them all. An archaeological variation may alter the picture elsewhere, so this remains a typical pattern rather than a universal law. The mind can hold it lightly, like a diagram slowly fading from a page. Now imagine one opulent couch in closer view. The wooden structure provides the scale. A fitting of bronze or ivory marks expense. No unsupported mechanism is exposed beneath it. No mattress filling is named. No bedroom routine is borrowed and placed around it. The object remains exactly where the source allows it to remain, inside elite banquet culture, carrying a reclining diner rather than an invented sleeper. Seen this way, restraint does not empty the past. It gives each surviving fact more room. The broadness of the couch matters. The inward-facing arrangement matters. The central table matters. The choice to recline matters. What matters as the frequent substance of the couch. Ivory and bronze matter as features of costly examples. Greek precedent matters as part of the wider culture. Each element can settle without competing with an unsupported anecdote. The room also reminds us that furniture can be language. A triclinium announces a kind of gathering through its plan. An opulent couch announces means through material. Reclining announces participation in a particular elite custom. None of these messages needs a written label attached to the object. People learn to read space through use, just as we learn the meaning of a modern room by noticing how its furniture faces. Still, that language was not spoken identically everywhere. Archaeological variants keep the type from becoming a rigid diagram. The phrase Roman world covers too much ground for a single furniture plan to stand without qualification. Tonight we remain with a representative elite banquet setting because its limits are known. Beyond its edges, other arrangements can rest unclaimed. The unclaimed space is important. It contains the sleeping furniture we have not sourced for this chapter, the modest dwellings we will not invent, and the inns and military quarters that require their own evidence. Leaving them undescribed is not a loss. It is a way of allowing the past to keep its scale. An empire does not have to fit into one dim room. Within our chosen room, the couches have already done enough. They have hosted the posture of elite dining. They have formed the three-sided plan remembered in the word triclinium. Their common wooden construction has carried the practical weight, while opulent fittings of ivory or bronze have carried a quieter message of cost and display. They have shown how a bed-like object can belong to a social evening without becoming evidence for Roman sleep. Soon our larger story will move away from movable furniture and toward a platform built into the architecture of a northern Chinese home. There, the problem changes again. Cold, heat, family activity, and the structure of the house create another meaning for the place where bedding can be unfolded. There is no need to hurry toward it. The Roman room can fade at its own pace. The imagined light leaves the central table first. Its edges soften until it is only a low shape. The ivory detail loses its pale distinction. The bronze glint becomes a dull point and then disappears. The wooden couches remain longest because they are broad, but even their outlines slowly merge with the room. No sleeper is added to the scene. No banquet is turned into a bedroom. The couches are permitted to rest as dining couches, empty now only within our literary night. Their meaning stays with the table and with the absent company they were made to receive. Three long forms surround one quiet center. Wood settles into shadow. Ornament becomes indistinct. The room holds its arrangement for a little while longer, and then the arrangement, too, becomes still. The fourth place in our slow history is not a bed that can be carried through a doorway. It is part of the room itself. We have come to a winter evening in northern China, to one of the colder regions where a traditional heated platform was known as a kang. This was not the arrangement of every Chinese household, and it did not belong equally to every district or century. China contained climates warm enough to demand very different habits, houses built in many forms, and families with very different means. Here, we are staying only with the broad pattern documented in older northern dwellings, where winter could press steadily against mud brick, timber, tile, and papered lattice. In such a place, the answer to cold was sometimes built into the architecture. A raised masonry platform occupied a portion of the room, often beside the brighter southern side of the house. Beneath its firm upper surface ran passages for hot air from a nearby cooking stove. At night, mats and folded quilts could turn that warm structure into a sleeping place. By day, when the bedding had been put away, the same platform might support sitting, sewing, eating, conversation, and ordinary household work. The room and the bed were therefore not separate things. Warmth moved through the house, and rest settled where the warmth remained. Imagine the evening beginning before the light has completely left the courtyard. Snow has gathered in shallow lines along the lower roof tiles. The sky beyond the lattice is pale and quiet, while the interior holds the soft brown color of timber and plaster. Someone has already used the stove for the evening meal. The fire is not large or theatrical. Fuel has always required attention, and a household fire was a working thing, tended for cooking and heat rather than for spectacle. The hot air from that stove is guided into internal flues beneath the raised platform. In a properly made system, the smoke does not wander freely through the room. It follows its route through the masonry and onward toward an outlet, while the mass of the platform takes in heat and releases it slowly. The exact construction could vary from one place to another, and no single diagram can represent every column. Yet the principle is calm and easy to follow. Fire warms moving air. Moving air warms brick and earth. Brick and earth retain some of that warmth after the flame has lowered. The sleeper lies above the stored heat, separated from the flue by the solid surface and the layers placed upon it. This makes the nightly preparation different from the lifting and shaking of a mattress on a wooden frame. The kang itself stays where it is. What changes is the collection of soft things placed upon it. A mat may first define a clean and even area. Quilted bedding, folded through the day, can then be opened and spread. A covering that had been kept in a chest or stacked neatly at one end begins to loosen as it is unfolded. The corners are drawn outward. The surface is smoothed with the palm. A pillow or head support is set into place. None of these details should be treated as identical across all northern households. Textiles differed with period, wealth, local craft, and access to cotton or other materials. Still, the rhythm of arranging portable bedding over permanent masonry was widely associated with the traditional kang. The hard platform supplied elevation and heat. The movable layers supplied whatever softness, cleanliness, and privacy a family could maintain. In the morning, these layers could be gathered again. The platform would return to its daytime uses, while the quilts became compact bundles of cloth and filling, waiting for another evening. The surface under those quilts would not feel exactly the same everywhere. Nearer the entry of hot air, the masonry could receive more heat. Farther along the flue, it might remain gentler. The household learned the character of its own platform in the same way that people learn the drafts of a familiar room. One place warmed first, another held heat longer. A corner near a wall felt different from the broad center. This practical knowledge did not need to be written on a plan. It came through repetition, through tending the stove, touching the surface, moving a mat, and deciding where to place a folded layer. Accounts of kang dwellings describe an arrangement shaped by routine rather than by a single precise temperature. We should resist giving the platform a modern number, as if every surface could be measured and compared. What mattered in daily life was the slower evidence of hands and bodies. The masonry no longer felt cold. The quilt did not draw away warmth as quickly. The air beside the lattice could remain sharp, while the place of rest held the memory of the evening fire. The location of the platform also connected it to daylight. In many traditional northern arrangements, the kang stood beside south-facing windows, where winter sunlight could reach the room. During the day, a low sun crossed the lattice and laid pale rectangles over matting and cloth. The same surface that held sleeping bodies at night could become a bright working area while the bedding was folded away. A person might sit there to mend a seam, sort food, watch a child, or take part in the small exchange of household talk. Such uses belong to particular domestic settings and should not be stretched into a claim about every family. They do, however, show why the platform cannot be understood only as a mattress made of brick. It organized part of the room. It offered a raised, dry, warmer plane within the house. Objects could be placed upon it and removed. People could gather there during the cold season. When evening returned, the same plane was cleared and remade for sleep. The transformation required no carpenter and no heavy furniture. It required folding, sweeping, laying out, and the patient management of fire. Morning storage was therefore part of the design. Bedding left permanently open would have occupied the space needed for other work. Folded bedding gave the platform back to the day. Imagine a quilt lifted from one long edge, then folded inward so the cooled side meets the warm side. Another fold makes it narrower. Air leaves it slowly, and the thickness settles under the weight of a forearm. Mats can be rolled or stacked according to their kind. Smaller cloths are shaken lightly, examined, and placed where they will stay dry. Dust and stray fibers are brushed from the masonry. In a room where fuel, food, work, and rest meet one another, order is not merely decorative. It keeps one task from hindering the next. The platform becomes a place to sit while the stove begins its morning labor. Later, sunlight may warm the surface from above as yesterday's fire fades below. By afternoon, the quilts remain waiting at one end of the room or in nearby storage. Then dusk gathers again, and the sequence reverses with the same unhurried movements. The stove at the beginning of the system deserves its own quiet attention. It may have been connected with daily cooking, allowing one fire to serve more than one domestic need. Fuel entered as stalks, brush, wood, or other locally available material, depending on place and household. We do not need to assign exact savings to understand the practical appeal of sharing heat. The cooking flame did its immediate work beneath a pot. The hot gases continued through the flues. The masonry accepted warmth that might otherwise have passed more directly away. Such a system depended on construction and care. Flues had to remain able to draw. Cracks and blockages could not be ignored. Ash had to be managed. The household's comfort rested not on a hidden miracle beneath the bed, but on repeated maintenance of the path the heat was meant to follow. The calm winter room was supported by tasks completed in daylight, by a stove cleaned, an opening checked, fuel dried, and bedding kept ready. Every restful surface in this history has concealed labor beneath it, and here that labor is built into brickwork as well as cloth. The word kang can tempt an outsider to picture one fixed object, reproduced unchanged from village to village. The surviving architecture and descriptions suggest more variety. Platforms could differ in size, position, internal route, and connection to a stove. Houses differed in wall material and plan. Family habits differed. Some rooms had arrangements that were more elaborate, while others were plainly made. The colder northern regions offered the climate in which this form of stored heat made particular sense. But even there it should not be treated as universal. A wealthy courtyard house and a modest rural dwelling did not present the same surfaces, textiles, or amount of space. A structure repaired over generations might also contain layers of alteration invisible to a visitor. The most honest image is therefore not a perfect specimen standing for a continent. It is a family of related solutions, each using masonry and guided heat to make a portion of the room more habitable during winter. The principle remains recognizable, while the details belong to their own locality. The firmness of the platform also asks us to loosen a modern assumption. Softness is not the only quality a sleeping place can offer. Earlier in our journey, layers of grass separated a body from cool earth. A wooden Egyptian frame raised woven support into moving air. Roman furniture combined frame, cords, cushions, and social use. Here the principal gift is warmth held in a stable mass. Mats and quilts can modify the hard surface, but they do not turn it into a deep modern mattress. Comfort arrives from the combination of heat, dryness, familiar posture, and carefully arranged textiles. What feels ordinary to one household may feel unfamiliar to another. Historical rest is easiest to understand when we stop ranking every bed on one ladder of softness. Different climates ask different questions. In a northern winter, the slow release of heat beneath a sleeper could matter more than a thick yielding layer that remained cold. The kang answered that local problem in architectural form. Its architecture also separated the heat source from the place where the body rested. The stove opening remained at one point in the room, while the warmed masonry extended beyond it. Hot air followed concealed channels instead of entering as an open flame beneath the bedding. In a soundly operating arrangement, smoke continued along its intended route rather than filling the household space. This distinction is easy to lose in a picture that shows only a glowing platform. The kang was not a fire placed directly under a quilt. It was a built path, with distance and solid material between combustion and sleep. That path made the platform part of the house's heating system, and it explains why construction mattered as much as fuel. A poorly drawn passage could not be corrected by adding softer bedding. The room depended upon the less visible geometry beneath its surface, maintained so warmth could arrive gently where people sat and slept. There is privacy here, though not necessarily the privacy imagined by a modern bedroom with one person and one locked door. Domestic rooms could serve several purposes, and the platform could belong to family life as much as to individual rest. The evidence allows us to say that it supported sleeping and daytime activity, but it does not allow one arrangement for every household. Screens, curtains, room divisions, schedules, and family custom varied. Bedding itself could mark the transition. When quilts were stacked, the platform belonged visibly to the day. When they were unrolled, smoothed, and placed in order, the room became ready for night. This change could occur without moving a wall or closing a distant corridor. A household recognized it through the altered surface, the dimmer lamp, the cooled stove opening, and the quieter voices. Privacy was made partly through timing and shared expectation. The room did not cease to be a room for work. It simply entered another part of its daily cycle. Now let the winter evening continue. The meal has been cleared. A bowl has been wiped and set away. Near the stove, a last piece of fuel settles with a dry sound. The cooking flame has lowered, yet the platform does not become cold at once. Stored warmth moves through masonry more slowly than flame. A hand placed on the surface can find it without seeing it. Quilts open in the amber light, their folds casting broad, quiet shadows. The wooden lattice is dark except where snow reflects a faint blue light from outside. No palace ornaments are needed. No painted screen needs to dominate the room. A simple platform, a mat, rolled bedding, plaster, wood, and one working stove are enough to tell this chapter. The calm comes from the relationship among them. Fire is kept at a practical distance. Warmth arrives from below. Cloth arrives from storage. Night arrives beyond the window. The kang also changes the meaning of making a bed. There is no frame to tighten in the evening and no tall canopy to dress. Making the bed means preparing a surface that has already carried the life of the day. A loose thread might be trimmed. A mat might be turned. A quilt might be aired when weather allows, then brought back inside before damp or snow can settle. The room is swept because the same raised plane receives hands, bowls, tools, and bodies at different hours. The platform's versatility increases the need for a clean transition between uses. This does not mean every historical household met a modern standard of cleanliness. It means that order and maintenance were recognizable forms of work. The neat pile of bedding at one end, the brushed surface, and the controlled stove opening all reveal a practiced system. Rest begins long before anyone lies down. It begins with the care that keeps warmth moving where it should and keeps the sleeping layers ready for their nightly return. Visitors writing about an unfamiliar house sometimes notice the kang because it did not fit their expectation of a separate bedstead. Yet for the people who used it, the arrangement belonged to the logic of the dwelling. The walls moderated wind. The southern exposure welcomed winter light. The stove cooked food. The flues carried heat. The masonry stored it. The textiles made it suitable for bodies. These functions overlapped, and none needed to stand alone as a piece of furniture in a catalog. This is a useful pause in the slow history of beds. It reminds us that an object category can hide a larger system. A bed may be timber and cord. It may be grass spread over ash. It may also be a warm zone inside a house, defined at night by the opening of a quilt. The problem changes, and the bed changes with it. Maintenance also left a slower calendar around the platform. Winter use asked for regular attention, but warmer weather offered chances to inspect what cold months kept busy. Loose plaster could be renewed. A damaged portion of a flue could be opened and repaired by someone who understood its route. Soot and ash belonged in their proper places, not in the living room and not in a passage meant to draw freely. Mats could be taken outside when the weather was dry. Quilts could be opened to light and air, their seams examined and their filling encouraged back into an even layer. None of this work made the kang new. It allowed an old structure to continue through another season. The yearly rhythm linked architecture to textile care, and textile care to the changing sky. During the coldest weeks, the bedding returned quickly to its warm place. In milder weather, the platform could stand uncovered for longer, plainly revealing the smooth masonry beneath the soft layers. Children growing up around such a platform would learn its boundaries through ordinary repetition. They would know that the stove opening was a place for care, that fresh bedding should not be stepped upon with outdoor dirt, and that a folded quilt was both useful and worth protecting. Older hands might smooth a surface in the same sequence each night, not from ceremony, but because the sequence worked. A guest would be shown where to sit. A bowl would be moved before bedding came out. A small object used for work would be gathered before the mat was spread. These gestures are difficult to recover in detail from architecture alone, so we should not invent one perfect family scene. Yet the design itself makes certain rhythms likely. A multi-purpose platform has to be changed from one use to another. Its transformation is made from small acts of clearing, folding, and placing, all quiet enough to belong to the approach of sleep. As the hours deepen, the room becomes quieter. The heat nearest the stove has softened. Farther across the platform, it has spread into a more even warmth. Outside, snow continues to settle on roof tile and courtyard earth. The lattice holds its dark pattern against the pale night. Inside, the lamp is lowered. Cloth no longer moves. The masonry releases what the evening fire left behind, not all at once, but in a long, gentle remainder. A quilt rises slightly with breath and falls again. The platform beneath it is solid, warm, and still. There is no hurry at all as we leave this northern room. The fire has completed its loudest work, and the house now keeps only its quiet warmth. Beyond the lattice, the snow becomes smooth, while within the room the folded edges of bedding disappear into shadow. The kang rests beneath the sleepers as part of the floor, part of the stove, and part of the night. Our fifth bed waits beside a road in late Elizabethan England. It is not hidden in a private chamber, and it is not modest in scale. The Great Bed of Ware, made around 1590, was more than 3 meters wide, a vast four-poster constructed at a time when the market town of Ware offered travelers a convenient overnight stop north of London. The surviving bed measures about 326 centimeters across, 267 centimeters high, and 338 centimeters deep. Those figures describe an object closer to a small timber room than to an ordinary household bedstead. Yet the numbers alone do not explain its quiet fame. Museum historians regard it as most likely made to attract visitors to an inn. It offered something to notice, remember, mention on the road, and perhaps seek out on a later journey. A bed had become an advertisement, not through a painted board over the door, but through its extraordinary presence inside. Travelers could arrive with damp cloaks and road dust, ask after the famous chamber, and find that the night's lodging contained a story already waiting for them. Where movement brought people and money through the town. Roads were not smooth ribbons, and travel did not end neatly at sunset. A traveler approached an inn by stages, passing fields, hedges, rutted ground, carts, and the gradual thickening of buildings near the town. The noises of arrival were ordinary ones. Hooves slowed on firmer ground. Harness shifted. A wheel complained once and then stopped. A door opened to warmer air scented with timber smoke, food, damp wool, and rushes or boards underfoot. Lodging depended on means, company, season, and the rooms available. The Great Bed should not be treated as a standard description of an English inn. It was famous precisely because it was exceptional. Its size made it worth reporting. Most beds did not invite comparison with a chamber. Most travelers did not sleep in carved monuments. In Ware, however, the unusual bed seems to have helped an inn become memorable among many possible stopping places. The timber frame rose on 4 posts, its heavy members creating a rectangle strong enough to carry broad bedding and enclosing hangings. Surviving carving gave the bed a decorative public face. Human figures formed part of that carving, and traces show that they were originally painted. The colors have not remained as a complete Elizabethan surface, so any exact reconstruction has to be cautious. It is enough to imagine that the bed once appeared brighter and more emphatic than bare dark would suggest today. Paint could draw out faces, clothing, moldings, and repeated shapes. In lamplight, those details would soften. The higher carving would recede into shadow, while lower edges caught small amber lines. The bed's great dimensions would still be clear, not because every measurement was known to the visitor, but because the posts stood farther apart than expected and the canopy enclosed an unusually broad space. The present hangings and bedclothes seen with the Great Bed are modern reproductions. This is an important, gentle boundary. The surviving frame can carry the evidence of late 16th century construction, carving, wear, and alteration, while the textiles around it help modern viewers imagine a dressed bed without claiming to be the original cloth slept under by Elizabethan guests. Historical beds were combinations of durable and perishable things. Timber could survive where sheets, blankets, curtains, cords, stuffing, and small repairs disappeared. A museum display must sometimes bring these layers together again, clearly distinguishing the old material from the later aid to understanding. In an inn around 1590, the bed would have depended upon textiles as much as wood. A bare frame could not offer a comfortable night. Bedding had to be filled, covered, aired, arranged, and renewed. Curtains could create a smaller zone within the chamber, moderating drafts and sight lines, while also contributing to display. Their fabric, color, and quality would have changed over the bed's long life. The reproduced cloth also prevents a visual misunderstanding. Without hangings, a four-poster can look like an open wooden scaffold, its upper members more architectural than domestic. With curtains and coverings in place, the enclosure becomes legible. The visitor can see how timber and textile work together, even while the label keeps old and new material distinct. The modern fabric does not tell us the exact pattern seen by a traveler in 1590. It restores the category of soft furnishing that time removed. The surviving traces of paint perform a different task. They belong to the old frame and show that its carved figures were not always the bare wooden forms visible today. One kind of evidence is original but fragmentary. The other is recent but explanatory. Held apart with care, they allow the bed's former richness to be imagined without disguising reconstruction as survival. Preparing such a broad bed was work. No surviving account allows us to follow one named servant through one exact evening, so the routine has to remain general and careful. The room would need to be opened, cleared, and inspected. Coverings could be drawn back to admit air. Sheets had to be spread over a surface far wider than one person's reach. One edge might be placed, then another adjusted from the opposite side. Pillows or bolsters required lifting and positioning. Curtains had to hang without being trapped awkwardly beneath bedding. Dust, candle drips, ash, and the residue of travel belonged to the continuing labor of an inn. A famous bed did not maintain itself merely by being famous. Its attraction depended on repeated domestic work, most of it performed without ceremony. The visitor remembered size and story. The people of the household remembered linen, stains, seams, keys, fires, and the time required to make a room ready again. The Great Bed was reputedly able to hold at least 4 couples. That phrase belongs to its reputation and should not be mistaken for a measured rule of nightly use. The capacity helped the bed travel through conversation. It was a comic, social, and slightly astonishing way to explain scale. The surviving object tells us how large the frame is. Later reports and literary references tell us how people spoke about it. They do not provide a register of every person who slept there or a fixed arrangement followed by each innkeeper. It is possible to appreciate the joke without turning it into a universal custom of shared sleep. Beds were shared under many historical circumstances, but household, hospitality, status, and necessity created different patterns. This chapter stays with one exceptional object and the fame that gathered around it. Guests left marks. Carved initials remain on the wood, along with traces of red wax seals pressed onto the bed by visitors. Such marks make the frame feel less like an untouched work of art and more like a place encountered repeatedly. An initial cut into timber is a small act, yet many initials accumulate into a restless surface. The people who made them wanted to attach a name, or at least a pair of letters, to the famous object. Wax seals added another kind of sign, red against painted or darkened wood, carrying shapes that once identified their owners more clearly. We do not need to know each visitor's story. The marks are enough to show that the bed invited participation. A traveler did not simply look and leave. Some pressed, scratched, or carved a memory into the material, adding another thin layer to the bed's long public life. This kind of fame moved beyond the inn chamber. Shakespeare referred to the bed in Twelfth Night in 1601, using its great width as something an audience could recognize. Ben Jonson called it the Great Bed of Ware in 1609. Literary mention does not tell us every practical detail of the room, but it confirms that the object's reputation had moved far enough to become useful in a line. The name itself carried an image of unusual breadth. People who had never slept beneath its canopy could still understand the comparison. The bed had become a shared reference, part furniture and part story. Its advertising work extended well beyond the wall of the inn. A remark on stage could return listeners to the road, the market town, and the celebrated chamber. At night, however, reputation had to give way to the simple business of resting. The traveler removed outer layers, placed boots where they would not carry more dirt across the room, and kept small possessions close. Money, papers, or a sealed letter might be tucked safely rather than displayed. The bed's immense frame could not guarantee quiet. An inn still contained footsteps, voices, doors, animals in nearby yards, and the arrival of people at inconvenient hours. Curtains and bedding made a smaller shelter within that activity. Cloth absorbed some light. Heavy folds softened movement beyond them. The posts defined corners even when the chamber remained unfamiliar. The visitor could lie beneath a piece of furniture already discussed by countless others, yet the body still asked for the same ordinary things as in any bed. A reasonably dry surface, enough warmth, a place for the head, and a few undisturbed hours mattered more than carved celebrity. The chamber would also change with season. England's damp air entered through doors, clothing, walls, and windows. Winter required more attention to covers and fire, while milder months asked for airing. Textiles in an inn passed through many hands and many nights, creating a cycle of use, cleaning, repair, and replacement. We cannot claim one perfect routine for the Great Bed across all its locations and owners. The bed itself moved during its history, while fashions in hangings and bedding changed around it. What remained was the broad framework, capable of being dressed again and again. Each new textile layer altered its appearance. A darker curtain made the interior seem deeper. A pale cover reflected more light. A worn edge might be turned inward. A repaired seam marked another period of service. The carved frame carried time slowly, while cloth carried it through frequent change. Consider the view from within the curtains. The outside room is reduced to a narrow opening, a line of floor, and the low glow of a lamp or candle kept at a safe distance. The canopy above turns the bed into an interior within an interior. Breath, fabric, and the small movement of another sleeper become more noticeable than the architecture beyond. The famous scale feels different from here. A bed that appeared enormous from the door can become a bounded field of sheets and shadow once the curtains are partly drawn. The carved figures outside no longer command attention. Their painted faces, where color survived in the Elizabethan period, would face the room while the sleepers looked toward cloth and darkness. Fame remains outside the fold. Inside, the bed performs its most ordinary task. In the morning, the public object returns. Curtains open. Daylight reaches the carvings. Bedding is lifted and the chamber shows its surprising width again. Any traveler who made a mark on the frame did so within a room being restored to order around them. A seal cooled against wood. A knife point formed an initial. A story was repeated downstairs or on the next stage of the road. The bed's identity depended upon this return to visibility. Closed for sleep, it was a sheltered space. Open by day, it was the thing people came to see. The inn could trade on both conditions. Guests paid for lodging, but they also carried away the tale of having encountered the Great Bed of Ware. There is a quiet commercial intelligence in that arrangement. An inn on a traveled route needed food, drink, shelter, staff, storage, and care for animals, all the ordinary infrastructure of stopping. A remarkable object could add distinction without replacing any of those needs. The bed made one lodging easier to remember. Museum historians describe it as most likely created as a tourist attraction, and that cautious phrase matters. No single surviving instruction from its maker announces a complete plan. The scale, location, early fame, and later history point strongly toward attraction, while still leaving room for uncertainty. It is better to say most likely than to turn probability into a recorded conversation. The bed's promotional role can remain persuasive without becoming absolute. Its survival also changes the way we picture the past. Large elite beds appear often in paintings, inventories, and collections because costly objects were more likely to be recorded and preserved. The Great Bed is even more unusual, preserved because it became famous. It cannot stand for the room of a farm laborer, a shop apprentice, a traveling servant, or every guest at an inn. Many people rested on narrower bedsteads, temporary bedding, shared surfaces, or arrangements that left little physical trace. The enormous four-poster shows one edge of the historical range. Its value lies not in proving that beds were generally vast, but in revealing how a bed could become spectacle, conversation, and business. It is a reminder that survival favors the remarkable, while most ordinary nights disappear. Still, even the remarkable object collected ordinary wear. Paint faded, timber darkened, visitors carved, wax adhered, hangings changed, bedding was replaced. The room around it altered, and the bed eventually passed into a museum collection where its frame could be studied and its story told. Modern reproduced textiles now make its form legible without pretending to be the original Elizabethan set. The distinction between surviving and recreated material is not a disappointment. It lets us see the two histories at once. One is the physical history of wood, carving, paint traces, marks, and dimensions. The other is the practical history of soft layers that had to be renewed whenever use and time demanded it. The wood also preserves the work of scale. A bed wider than 3 meters required more than the simple enlargement of a small household frame. Long members had to meet posts securely. The canopy and carved upper structure had to hold their place above an unusually broad opening. Separate pieces were shaped so they could become one stable object, and the finished frame had to enter the working life of an inn. We should not invent a named workshop or assign every tool stroke without records. The surviving construction is enough to remind us of planning, timber selection, fitting, carving, painting, assembly, and later repair. The maker worked toward a result that had to be both functional and immediately legible as extraordinary. Broad dimensions drew the eye before a visitor examined a single carved face. Its size also made every soft layer a larger household possession. A sheet for such a surface consumed cloth, sewing time, washing effort, and drying space. Hangings demanded yet more material. A filled mattress or layered bedding could be difficult to lift evenly, so routine maintenance may have involved more than one pair of hands. These are practical inferences rather than a surviving duty list for one particular night. They follow from the dimensions and from the general needs of textile bedding, but they should remain modest. The exact fillings, laundering intervals, and staffing changed over time. The safe point is simpler. Display on this scale rested upon labor on the same scale. Guests saw a marvel. The household managed an expanse of cloth. There were quieter moments between guests when the bed belonged mostly to those who cared for it. Daylight from a window could reveal dust along a molding or a loose thread at the edge of a hanging. Fingers could test a fastening, smooth a cover, and notice where repeated handling had polished the wood. Red wax marks and carved initials complicated that care. They were damage in one sense, yet they also became evidence of celebrity. Removing every trace would have erased the behavior that made the object socially distinctive. Over time, use and memory settled together on the frame. The bed was preserved not as an untouched thing, but as a thing repeatedly encountered. When a traveler left Ware, the bed could remain vivid after details of supper or weather had faded. A story required no accurate recitation of centimeters. It only needed an image of width, a reference to the people it was said to hold, and the name of the town. Each retelling simplified the object while strengthening its fame. Literature did something similar, using the bed as a known comparison rather than pausing to inventory the frame. This is how furniture enters cultural memory. It moves first through rooms, then through speech, writing, and reputation. The Great Bed traveled without leaving Ware, carried along roads in the accounts of people who had seen it and people who had only heard its name. Let the inn settle now. A last cup is moved from a table below. Harness hangs quietly near the yard. The road outside has emptied into darkness, and the chamber holds only a low amber light. Curtains gather around the great frame, taking its public width and turning it into folds. Initials and seals remain on the outer timber where no sleeper needs to see them. Within, cloth lies still across the broad surface. The Great Bed no longer needs to advertise itself for these few hours. Its carved posts fade upward. Its painted figures become only soft shapes. The inn grows quiet around it, and the famous bed becomes, at last, simply a place where travelers rest. Outside, the road waits without movement. Inside, the broad curtains hang without a sound. Fame, carving, wax, paint, and travelers' initials all remain beyond the sleeper's attention, while the linen holds only the warmth of the night. By morning, the name of Ware will return with the daylight. For now, the bed's measured width, its literary reputation, and its long collection of visitors are quiet facts held in timber. The chamber keeps no need for exaggeration. One unusually large surviving frame is enough, resting in darkness while the town sleeps around it. Our final chapter begins among pieces rather than in a finished bedroom. It is the 19th century, and a bedstead can increasingly appear as a set of repeated parts moving through a workshop, a storeroom, an institution, or a household. Timber remains everywhere. Textiles remain essential. Local repair and individual craft do not disappear. Beside them, however, are beds made to meet the organized routines of a community or a hospital. We will follow only two surviving examples, because two objects cannot speak for an entire century. One is a wooden shaker bedstead made in the United States between about 1830 and 1860. The other is an English cast-iron hospital bed dated to the second half of the 19th century. They belong to different countries, materials, beliefs, and settings. They should not be blended into one simple march toward the modern bed. Placed quietly beside one another, they show something more useful. A bed could be shaped for cleaning, order, durability, and the repeated work of a shared institution, while still depending on the old nightly sequence of support, filling, covering, warmth, and rest. The Shaker bedstead is made of wood. Its outline is restrained, guided by a community in which order and shared rules enter deeply into material life. The surviving example has small wooden wheels that do not pivot. They allow the bed to roll in a straight direction, so it can be pulled away from a wall when bedding must be changed or the space around it cleaned. The detail is modest enough to overlook. These are not broad modern casters turning easily in every direction. Their purpose can be understood through the routine they assist. A person grips the frame, draws it outward, attends to the wall and floor, then guides it back along the same line. Furniture becomes slightly cooperative with housekeeping. The bed is still solid and familiar, but it no longer has to remain immovable while dust gathers where hands and brooms cannot reach. Within Shaker communities, material simplicity did not mean the absence of careful specification. The community's millennial laws of 1845 included instructions that bedsteads should be painted green. That rule gives the object a place inside an organized visual world. It does not mean every surviving Shaker bed now presents exactly the same shade or finish, nor that one written instruction was followed without exception in every settlement and year. It does show that a bedstead could be considered as part of communal order, down to its color. Green paint-covered timber made separate objects appear related and offered a surface that could be maintained. The bed belonged not only to the person lying upon it, but also to a shared system of making, using, inspecting, and caring for rooms. Imagine that bed in a plain room after daylight work has ended. Its wooden wheels rest in line with the wall. The floor around it has been swept. A mattress and covers soften the frame, but they do not hide its straightforward shape. Paint catches the low light without elaborate carving. The room is not empty of feeling simply because its objects are orderly. A folded quilt carries the pressure of hands that made and maintained it. A sheet has been smoothed. The pillow lies where the sleeper expects it. Simplicity has its own texture, made from even surfaces, repeated proportions, quiet color, and the absence of unnecessary obstruction. When the bed is drawn out for cleaning, the movement is practical. When it returns, the room settles again. The non-pivoting wheels tell us something about the direction of labor. Changing bedding is easier when each side can be reached. Cleaning is more complete when the wall and floor are exposed. Yet the wheel does not perform those tasks. A person still lifts, folds, brushes, washes, dries, mends, and replaces. Small adjustments to furniture can support labor without eliminating it. The history of the bed is filled with these modest negotiations between object and caretaker. A woven support can be tightened. A curtain can be drawn. A quilt can be rolled away from a heated platform. A frame can be moved from a wall. The work changes shape, but the need for care remains. Now cross the Atlantic and move later into the 19th century to a surviving English hospital bed made of cast iron. Museum dating places it between 1851 and 1900. This example is short and low. It does not adjust, and it has no springs. Iron bars form the support beneath whatever bedding was provided. The museum notes that thin bedding would have left those bars uncomfortable. That plain observation keeps us close to the object. Iron alone did not create comfort. Durability and cleanable surfaces did not replace the need for sufficient layers above. A patient resting on this frame depended on mattress, pad, sheet, blanket, and attentive arrangement just as a wooden bed required its own soft complement. The surviving hospital bed is probably typical of the type used in hospitals, but that cautious wording must remain. It is one example, not a complete census of Victorian wards. Hospitals differed in date, funding, purpose, staff, and local supply. Some beds were altered, some replaced, and some were never preserved. The cast iron frame shows that institutions could value a bed as durable equipment with a regular place in a ward. It does not prove that every hospital adopted the same design at once, nor does it prove that iron automatically solved insects, infection, or discomfort. Promotional language about hygiene was common around manufactured goods, but a material claim is not the same as a measured medical outcome. The safest picture is of a sturdy, low, non-adjustable frame, useful within an organized room, and still incomplete without the labor and bedding around it. The phrase "probably typical" is useful because it describes resemblance without turning one survivor into a universal model. A museum object can preserve dimensions, material, joints, bars, and the absence of an adjusting mechanism. It cannot by itself count all the beds purchased elsewhere. Its iron surface may show long service, yet it does not record the thickness of every mattress placed upon it. The note about thin bedding and uncomfortable bars joins the visible frame to a cautious practical observation. More padding would change the body's contact with the support. Less padding would allow the bars to be felt more clearly. This is not a claim that every patient experienced the same night. It is a reminder that the institutional frame and the issued bedding worked as one system, and that studying only the metal leaves the sleeping place unfinished. In a ward, repetition becomes visible. Bed follows bed, with walking space, windows, and staff routines arranging the room. The exact layout varied, so our scene need not pretend to reproduce one named hospital. We can stay with the surviving frame after hours, standing quietly on a wooden or hard floor, its iron members catching a narrow line of lamplight. During the day, people moved around it to bring water, food, linen, and care. At night, those movements softened but did not cease. A hospital bed was not a private household possession or an inn attraction. It was equipment assigned to a place of treatment and supervision. Its form supported an institution's need to use, clean, and maintain many sleeping places over time. The frame's low height and short length belong to this particular example. They should not become a claim that people of the period were generally smaller or slept in one peculiar posture. Beds survive in dimensions shaped by setting, intended users, cost, and design. A short object tells us its own measurement, not an entire population's body. The absence of springs is equally specific. This bed relied on iron bars beneath the bedding. Other 19th-century beds used different supports. Springs existed in the broader world of manufactured bedding, but they did not arrive everywhere in one moment and did not replace older systems all at once. Historical change is usually a crowded room. Wood, rope, sacking, metal, filling, and woven support can coexist across regions and decades. The modern-looking material of iron should not persuade us that every familiar modern comfort arrived with it. Manufacture did allow certain forms to be repeated, ordered, repaired, and placed in groups. Iron components could be produced in workshops and moved to institutions that needed durable equipment. Wooden bedsteads could also follow communal specifications and familiar patterns. Yet standardization was never complete or immediate. Regional measures differed. Households kept old frames in service. A mattress might be remade while its bedstead remained. A hospital might purchase beds in stages rather than replace an entire ward. Transport influenced what could arrive, and budgets influenced what could be chosen. The 19th century bed is therefore best seen as a layered field of old and new practices. Manufactured parts entered rooms already full of local habits. Soft materials continued to carry the closest contact with the body. Mattress ticking enclosed filling. Sheets absorbed warmth and required washing. Blankets and quilts answered season. Pillows compressed and needed attention. Even where frames became more uniform, these upper layers recorded difference. An institution might issue bedding according to its own stores and schedules. A household might make, inherit, purchase, or repair each piece over years. A Shaker community could place a green bedstead within an ordered room, while the quilt above it carried its own pattern of work. An English hospital could use an iron frame, while the comfort of a patient depended heavily on how much lay between the body and the bars. The frame was only one layer in the bed. Cleaning also remained a sequence rather than a property. Iron can be wiped, and a movable wooden bed can expose the floor behind it. Neither cleans itself. Bedding has to be removed. Dust has to be seen. Water, cloth, brush, soap, sunlight, and drying air have to be used according to circumstance. A stained or damaged textile has to be replaced or repaired. The language of improvement often attaches itself to new materials, but daily results depend on people, time, supplies, and practice. This is especially clear in an institution where many beds multiply every task. A durable frame may survive rough, repeated use. It may simplify one portion of maintenance. The room still asks for hands. Let us pause in the workshop suggested by these forms. Wooden rails stand beside turned or shaped posts. Small wheels wait to be fitted in a line. Elsewhere, iron has cooled into a rigid member that will become part of a low hospital frame. The tools and processes are different, and we should not invent one factory making both. They belong together only in our slow comparison. One object expresses the organized life of a religious community. The other serves institutional care. Both reveal that the bed can be specified for a system larger than one sleeper. Color, movement, material, height, and support become matters of shared practice. At the same time, neither object removes the sleeper's private scale. A community rule may paint the frame green, but the night is still felt one breath at a time. A hospital may arrange beds in rows, but discomfort remains particular to the body lying above iron bars. The public system and the private experience occupy the same furniture. This tension has accompanied many beds in our journey. The Roman dining couch served social ritual and bodily repose. The Great Bed served advertisement and sleep. The kang organized household activity and nighttime warmth. A bed can belong to an institution, a business, a family, and a single tired person in different proportions. The 19th century also leaves more records, catalogs, regulations, and surviving manufactured objects than remote archaeological periods. But abundance can mislead in its own way. A printed claim may describe what a maker hoped to sell rather than what every household owned. A rule may describe an intention rather than perfect practice. A museum object may survive because it was preserved after most everyday examples were discarded. Evidence remains uneven even when paper and iron endure. We should keep the two beds close to their labels. The Shaker bedstead dates from about 1830 to 1860, has straight-running wooden wheels, and belongs to a community whose 1845 laws specified green-painted bedsteads. The English hospital bed dates from the second half of the century, is cast iron, short, low, non-adjustable, and without springs. Beyond those secure edges, the story becomes cautious. Morning would reveal the practical character of both objects again. In the Shaker room, a quilt could be folded back and the bed drawn straight from the wall. The little wooden wheels would follow their fixed direction, exposing the narrow space behind the frame. Dust that had been hidden in evening shadow could be reached. The bed could then return to its place, aligned once more with the orderly room. In the English hospital, bedding could be removed from the low iron support and replaced according to the institution's routine and supplies. The bars remained visible for a time, plain and uncompromising, until soft layers covered them again. In each setting, mourning separated the bed into parts. Frame, mattress or pad, sheet, cover, and pillow became individual things requiring individual attention. This separation matters because the word bed often makes them seem like one object. In practice, a bedstead might last while its mattress was renewed. A blanket might move to another room. A sheet passed through washing and returned to a different frame. Wheels belonged to the structure, while paint could be repaired on its surface. Iron bars carried load, while ticking contained the filling above. Institutions made these parts legible because they had to count, store, clean, and replace them. Households knew the same truth on a smaller scale. A sleeping place is assembled from materials with different lifespans. Wood and iron endure slowly. Cloth wears close to the body. Filling compresses. Paint chips. A loose fastening announces itself with movement. The nightly hole is temporary, even when the frame remains for decades. There is also no need to call one frame superior in every way. The shaker bed's wooden wheels supported a particular cleaning practice. The hospital bed's cast iron offered durability suited to institutional use. Neither feature guarantees a peaceful night. Noise in a ward, illness, insufficient bedding, winter air, or simple wakefulness could remain. Likewise, a plain community room could be orderly without being equally comfortable to every sleeper. Historical objects tell us what materials and arrangements made possible. They rarely reveal the complete sensation of one night. The calmest way to approach them is to let construction remain construction, routine remain routine, and private experience retain some silence. Now the last room grows dim. The iron frame stands quietly after the ward's evening tasks. Bedding has softened its bars, though the amount of comfort belongs to circumstances we cannot recover. A lamp has been lowered. Footsteps pass at a distance and then fade. Across the ocean, the green-painted wooden bed rests against its wall again after cleaning. Its small wheels no longer move. A quilt lies over its plain rails. Two different institutions, two different nights, and the same gradual stillness gather around them. We can now look back through every layer of our journey. Far in the past, broadleaf grass lay over ash in a sheltered cave, creating a surface for sleeping and working that archaeologists can only partly recover. In ancient Egypt, wood and flexible supports raised some sleepers from the floor, while linen and a curved headrest shaped a preserved furniture tradition known unevenly through tombs and surviving objects. In an elite Roman dining room, couches held conversation and ceremony, reminding us that a reclining frame was not reserved for sleep. In northern China, the kang made warmth part of the house, storing heat beneath mats and quilts. At Ware, an enormous carved bed turned lodging into reputation. Here, wooden wheels and cast iron placed bedsteads inside the routines of communities and care. The materials changed, but the nightly gestures remained familiar. A surface was cleared. A support was checked. Filling was shaken or smoothed. A covering was unfolded. Warmth was gathered from fire, cloth, masonry, or another layer. Privacy was made with distance, curtains, timing, or simple quiet. In the morning, bedding was aired, folded, moved, washed, mended, or prepared for someone else. No single invention completed the bed. Each place answered a different problem, and every answer carried work within it. Perhaps the room around you now has a frame, a mattress, sheets, and a pillow whose shapes would seem familiar to many recent generations. Even so, it still belongs to the old sequence: floor, support, filling, covering, warmth, and quiet. The layers hold you above the ground. Cloth settles where it was placed. The room cools while the bed keeps a smaller climate close to the body. Nothing more needs to be arranged tonight. The green wooden frame is still. The iron bars are hidden beneath their coverings. The great carved posts at where have faded into shadow, and snow lies quietly beyond the lattice of the northern room. Farther back, the Roman dining room recedes into an imagined amber hush. Egyptian linen rests without movement, and ancient grasses settle beside cooling ash. The long history of beds has become only texture, warmth, and breath. The floor is quiet beneath every layer. The coverings no longer need turning or folding. Through the remaining dark, each sleeping place holds its small share of warmth and asks nothing more from the night. Thank you for spending the night in history with me. I'm the Yawning Historian.